Following the thousands of views of our three-part series on child sexual abuse looks something like this with Manyi Anabor, I heard from many of you asking lots of questions, pouring out your support and love for Manyi, but in particular wanting to know how she's doing. That culminated in this chat where Manyi talks about her healing process and answers all the other questions you all have. Take a listen. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Mama Talk Talks, a different take. I'm your host, AB Mambo, and what a week! What a week! Manyi, welcome back to the show. And my goodness, what a week! How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I'm really glad that we're back here for another episode. Uh, what a week, definitely.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about when we keep saying what a week, last week, I think it just seems like so far away now because so much has happened since then. But last week, Manny was the guest on the show, and we had a three-part series that examined your experience, Manny, with child sexual abuse. And that was as heavy as I've ever had an episode on this show. And the outpouring of just love and support and community and outrage has been phenomenal. Um, so today, I wanted us to have a second chat because I think after we spoke and I put out that episode of that three-part series, a lot of people went through their own version of trauma, whether it's because they had experienced something like this and had buried it deep, 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 deep within somewhere, or because the way you tell your story, man, it brings it to life in a way that I have never heard anybody talk about sexual abuse before, and then especially in a child. So there are a number of things I want us to accomplish here. One is just first of all to check in because you and I have been talking and texting, but a lot of people don't know how you're actually doing. So they wanted to kind of check in and make sure that you're doing fine. So I wanted to do that check in. And then to kind of talk about your healing process. I think a lot of people are still feeling like, how is she here walking this earth, being a productive human being? Like, how did she get through this? And so they want to know either for themselves or because they just it's really hard to think about what you went through and how you're just like living life now. So that healing part I want to talk about. I also honestly think that all of us need healing collectively.
For sure.
And then to talk about where do we go from here? Because it's great that we've raised awareness, right? Across all three episodes now, we've had, I think we're at 3,000 or 4,000 views, which is phenomenal for the
It is.
show. And when I called you up to invite you to the show about this, we had a chat about what we wanted to accomplish, which was raise awareness, raise awareness, raise awareness. I think that we can see we've done that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, where do we go from Manyi? Again, for everybody who's not followed the previous episode, Manyi Anabor, author of the memoir called Cactus in the Calabash. Do I have it the other way around?
Oh, yes, you're correct. Spot on.
Good. I've been
Yes.
telling everybody about it. Cactus in the Calabash, which is a memoir about your experience with child sexual abuse at the hands of a household member. So, Manny, again, welcome to the show. I'm glad that you have the energy to come back and give us some more. So, how have things been since the release of those episodes?
So things have been quite chaotic in terms of people reaching out, sending messages. I think generally it was very well received. And to be honest, I think that was the first time, apart from me sitting one on one with a therapist, but that was the first time I'd ever sat in one seating and talked about like more or less the entire abuse, the entire thing.
Yeah.
So yes, it was draining for me when I spoke about it, but I had never watched it back to see what that was like until you published the videos.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so that was a first for me as well. And in watching it back, I have to say I was really proud of myself because I felt like, wow, how did I do that? How did I sit there and recount all of that? And it was pretty accurate in very pretty accurate detail, which was mind blowing that I could remember to
Yeah,
that extent.
yeah,
So yes, it was I was very proud of myself, and so I wasn't surprised with the number of messages that came pouring in, just wishing me well and telling me how grateful they were for that I spoke up about my story to inform other people, and just with lots of questions. To be honest, I think it was mainly just lots of questions about
yeah,
because in even in one sitting you can't talk about every single thing extensively. So I had lots of questions asking a whole, about different various incidents, about how I'm doing now, and about different people who are involved in my story. So yes, I managed to respond to loads, but not all of them. There's so many.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
but I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking, and thanks to everyone else who reached out to ask. I'm doing really well. Yeah. I am very grateful that I have a great life. I have nothing to complain about. I know when you listen to my story, it's very easy to. I mean, it's understandable that you would feel so hurt and sad and every negative emotion possible. But fortunately, and somehow, I'm fine. I'm great. I'm happy. I'm
Mhm.
healthy. I have an amazing, hilarious husband who keeps me laughing. I have great, happy, healthy children, and I honestly have nothing to complain about. So it's just worked out that way for me, and I'm very, very thankful for that.
I think that's part of the magic of this story, right? Is how you take it. Because you talk about the fact that we sat down, and I tell people this, it was 3.5 hours that we
It
sat
was.
down and talked, right? And we had initially scheduled it for an hour. And by the time the hour ended, we had just, I
We
think
hadn't even.
we were in the grooming phase.
Mhm,
And at that point, I adjusted body, right? I'm like, I need
mhm,
some tea, I need more water, something, because we're going to be here for a while. And I got to tell you, I think when we spoke beforehand, and I'm glad you did this because I think if I had come in knowing the whole thing, it wouldn't have flowed the way it did.
mhm.
But I thought I had a general sense of your story, right? And then we start talking. And I've received a lot of feedback about my facial expressions, by the way. They're like, like what a lot of people say.
Yes, yes.
That my face was a whole language on its own. And, it was funny for me because, I'm very conversational during the show. That's why I host the show.
Mhm,
But even in me watching it back, like you said, there were some things that were surprising for you when you watched, but in me watching it back, I was in shock. Like my body was tight
mhm.
the whole time. I was just in shock.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Mhm,
And but there was one thing that kept on going in the back of my head was this is not gonna be a regular interview because I really wanted it to be about you telling your story. And had I kept peppering it with questions, that space to just kind of narrate, right, would have been sucked up. And I'm so glad I just kind of pulled back. But it was part intentional, part shock, and just saying, what am I hearing?
mhm,
And so, I was surprised at how brave you were in telling the story. And it was so matter of fact. I was sitting there going, how can she sit here and just tell the story? I don't know where I would be. So again, I know I've said this before, but I really want to say thank you for sharing your story, for doing it on this platform. When I started this show, I was always about bringing in different perspectives of an issue, but I really, really wanted to make sure that marginalized voices had a place to be. I don't care where you are from in the world.
mhm,
If your voice is marginalized on a critical issue like this, I want you to know that MamaTokTok is a place where you can come chat to us
mhm,
to bring these issues to the world. The number of stories I heard, Manny, I remember I think it was Friday or a day or two
Okay.
after it was published. I was
Right.
talking to someone and she began telling me her story.
Okay.
And before I knew it, I was just in tears because
Oh.
I think people had been sending messages saying it was kind of like a Me Too thing. There was like, this happened to me, but nobody had shared their story in that way like you had done. So when I sat here listening to this other person, I was just so broken up because I just thought, how rampant is this? So
Mm.
you've been doing some shows on this, you've talked to groups before. How rampant is child sexual abuse?
Oh, it's very common. It's very common. And I think because I've experienced it myself, I know how easy it is to abuse a child. Mainly because it's usually done by someone who knows the child and who the child knows and who the child's parents know. So it just makes it that much easier. It's very common. It's very common. You know, I don't know the statistics, but I know it's very, very common. I know for a fact that 93% of people who are of children who are abused are known or know that they're abuser. So it's very easy for this to happen, and I think that's the reason why it's very important for me to let as many people as possible hear my story so that
Yeah.
they realize that look, this is how it happens, and this is the extent to which it can happen, and these are the side effects, the after effects of it. It's horrible.
And
Mm,
the scary thing is, it's very easy for somebody to watch this and say, okay, the context here is Cameroon, or the context here is African, and the context here is blah, blah, blah. No, the context here is life.
mhm,
It's this world, it's society, this happens across geographic boundaries, across continents. It's not an issue that is limited to any one group of people, right? And this is the thing that more than anything else, it's important for people to understand. So, and we'll get into the questions in a little bit, but some of the reflections I had coming out of our conversation was wealth doesn't mean you're not going to be abused. Poverty doesn't mean you're not going to be abused. Having a loving family doesn't mean you're not going to be abused. Um, being in school, being educated doesn't mean you're not going to. It's not. There are no clear parameters that say
no.
you're more likely to be abused than you, right? It's a
Mhm,
question of how engaged our parents, our guardians, and one of the things that I came out of that conversation struggling with is this whole notion of a village raises a child. And I remember asking you in the course of the interview, where was the village?
mhm,
Where was this village? Right? And
mhm,
I'm still struggling with that. So for anyone who's listening, please don't kid yourself. I'm not trying to get people to be scared and paranoid, but seriously, there are no clear lines as to what will protect you from sexual abuse in terms of wealth, socioeconomic class, race, gender. No such thing. The thing that struck me too was as soon as that show came up, the very first comment on the very first episode came from a guy. And he said, great video. Thanks for sharing. Do you have any stories about men or boys who have been molested?
mhm.
So again,
Interesting.
the fact that that was the first question that came up tells me that this is not limited to girls.
Mm,
I already knew this, but it was so good to hear that come from a guy, first of
mm,
all. Because I think as we talk about this issue, we need to really just help people understand there is no clear line,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
That says you're not gonna get abused, but you are. And that,
Mm,
that I think is what's kind of scary about this. But kind of coming back and starting with perhaps everybody's question, I got a request saying, can you please do a hashtag where's George?
yes,
So I
I
can
know.
find
I
George.
know. I know. I've looked for I've searched online, you can only search on social media, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I told you in the last yes, I did search, didn't find the person I found didn't seem anything like what I remember him to look like.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have no idea where he is at all. At all. So,
So I'll ask as many audience questions as
yes,
possible. And I have
please.
my
Yeah.
So we'll just start with George.
Okay.
What do you wish for George?
Oh, what I wish for George, I'm like, I don't know if I can say it here, but
Okay.
it's when I think about that, I mean, honestly, I would want him to spend the rest of his life in jail,
Hmm.
but enduring every single thing he did to me and my brothers in jail for the rest of his life, just so he can feel what it felt like. Because, yes, I don't get it. I don't understand what that was about. Were there no adults his age who he could have
Yeah.
sex with?
Yeah.
Were there no, what was that? And that is a question which, if I have an opportunity, I would like to find out, adult to adult, what was that shit about? What was that?
Yeah.
How can you do that to a child? For such a long period of time in such
For
a
any
brutal
period
way,
of
for any period of time in such a brutal way. It was horrific. It was horrific. It's a miracle to even me that I am here and I can talk about it, and just like it's a memory or something that happened, and not feel the pain, because it was horrific. It really was. It really was. So what I would wish for him is for him to go through exactly the same thing that he put me through. That's what I would wish.
You know, as I hear you speak, I am so happy because I hear anger in your
Yeah.
voice now. I hear rage. And the thing that I was grappling with the last time we spoke was, where was the rage? Because in a way, I think you went into this place where you were telling the story. So you didn't there was no room for the emotion to come out because we were on a mission, and the mission was to
Mhm.
tell this story. So I think hearing that anger in your voice right now, I'm really happy to hear it, but it's also like, yeah, it's there because
Yeah.
all of us are angry with you,
Mhm.
for
Oh yeah.
you,
Mhm.
right? And it is just it's a lot. I don't know how you're here, and
Mhm. Yes, I mean, of course, in and how I can explain it is, when I'm narrating it, right? I am narrating it. And in my daily life, like I said, I've narrated my story for years. So when I went to secondary school, I did tell my friends, not in detail. I just told them, I was raped by the houseboy, but I never went into detail. When I went to high school, upper sixth, lower sixth, same thing. When I started working, when I went to university, I always narrate my story. For some reason, I think because it was so painful, it was so traumatic. Whenever I met people, I, narrated my story, or mentioned it, and it. So in having said that, I've always said it. I think that by getting it out of me,
mm,
be it by writing it or by speaking about it, even though it's not in extensive detail, I think that helped me to get it out,
yeah,
and so I got used to talking about it without as much emotion, without being so angry. Like, you get the anger out, you're getting it out in small increments as years go by, and so you're less and less angry. So when I first started talking about it, in my teenage years, I would get so shivery and anxious and cry and teary-eyed
yeah,
sometimes. But as the years went by, I would talk about it without shedding a tear. I think it's just like with any other trauma that anyone has been through. As time goes on, you heal a little bit more, and you feel the pain a little less each time. Not to say that the
yeah.
pain is not there, it is there, but you just feel it a little less every single time. So, yeah. So I think when we talked about it the last time, yeah, I was narrating it, and yes, I think I was focused on
You were in the
getting.
zone.
Right, focused on getting everything out, and not distracting myself with allowing myself to feel that pain again, to actually
Yeah.
go in there and feel the pain, which I was forced to do when I was writing my book. So I had no choice. I had to go there, like, and yes, so that was difficult. Writing the book
Inside.
was, it was
Yeah.
horrific. I cried a lot when I was
Yeah.
writing it. Yes,
Yeah.
but it was therapeutic as well. But when I allow myself to feel it, I do feel it. But those chances don't really, I mean, it's not a chance or an opportunity. I don't feel the need to allow myself to go back to those feelings. And
All the time. Yeah.
yes, there's no point. It doesn't serve me in any way. So
Yeah.
so I just don't go there. Yeah.
And I can also imagine, I mean, if you, because I remember at some point you were you were describing something. I remember putting my hand to my throat like I'm gonna throw up,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
you asked me, am I okay? So
Yes.
I can imagine how, it would be hard for you to actually go into the emotions because
Mhm.
even in just sharing the facts, you have people looking at you like, What? And there's no room for your own emotions because our collective shock kind of takes up the space, our collective
Sure.
outrage takes up the space, right? So I'm actually really happy that we can sit here now and talk about what it felt like for you.
Yeah.
So if just putting it out in the universe, if there's anybody who's gone through this at the hands of George, we stand with you, and whatever it is that we can do to bring awareness, to give space for your own voice to tell your story, because I know we all have our own different degrees of trauma. There is something about speaking that trauma out of your system that's part of that first step towards healing. So we'll go from there to start talking about your healing. And I think the pathway from George to your healing is the second most asked question, which was, where were your parents? Which I asked a lot on the show, but I think much more so now. How what are their reflections? How are they feeling? What is your relationship with them in the aftermath of all of this? So if we can start from just, how are things between you guys, and do they understand now what happened, and just how are they? Because I mean, I struggle with this, right, Manny, because
Mhm.
on the one hand, I can say, where were your parents? Where were your parents? Where were your parents? On the other hand, the way you describe George, this stuff was so malicious. It's like, as a parent, I would be, if this happened to my child under my roof and I didn't catch on, I don't know what I would do with myself when I find out, right? It is our children are a sacred work in a way, right? They're our gift,
Yeah.
but they're our sacred work. And when something like this happens, what do you do as a parent? Like, what do you do with yourself? So I struggle because on the one hand, I want to say, where were they? On the other hand,
Mm.
it's like, if they didn't hand you over for this to happen and they were not aware, are they just kicking themselves? And how do you fix that for a child?
Right.
You can't take that back. Like,
Okay.
how do you fix that? So, how, where do you think they are in their own just feelings and hearts about this whole thing?
So I as far as that is concerned, when I first told my parents, well, I didn't tell them directly that I was raped. I told my eldest brother, and then he broke it to them. So when they first found out, there was a whole crazy string of things that happened in which I think my mom must have felt so bad, so guilty. So she actually didn't even reach out to me at all until I found out a few days later that she had been told about what I went through. And so I was enraged and I called her to say, "So you've heard and you haven't even reached out," and which hurt me even more.
Yeah.
And she was just speechless. So this was years ago. It was over 10
How
years
old were
ago.
you then?
I was 27 when I 26, not 27. I was 26 when this happened. So I think now thinking about it, she must have been just completely torn and devastated. So she didn't tell me anything that was useful to me at the time. She just was. like, what do you want me to say? She didn't know what to say, and
Oh
so
yeah.
we didn't speak for a while. I stopped speaking to her, not very long, probably about a couple of months, a month or to a couple of months, and because I was so upset with that reaction of hers. My dad, on the other hand, was he asked me a few questions, said he was sorry. He said he couldn't remember who the houseboy was. But at the same time, I had my brother had told him that my uncle had molested me as well. And so I don't know if I even mentioned that in our interview.
No.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so that happened. So during the time when I do all those years when I was being raped by George, my uncle molested me as well when I was 10 years old. So, and that's one of the things that can happen. Once you've been molested, you are more likely to be molested again as a child or as an adult. But that's a whole nother chapter. So
But,
my
but
mhm.
hmm. Okay, so I'm getting the shakes because that, you know, the thing that I kept saying when we spoke was somebody knew something. Somebody knew something in that house. Like it cannot be that nobody knew anything. And as you're talking about your uncle, I'm like, okay, so did he live with you guys?
No, he didn't. He lived in the same neighborhood in Douala, but not in the same house. He was very notorious as a womanizer, but for adults, with adult women, not kids. But he molested me, and but I know that when I told my brother at 26 years old, and my brother told my dad, I knew that they were not surprised. He wasn't surprised. They weren't surprised about that. I know that they weren't surprised because he is known to be a womanizer. But,
But
to
womanizer
have
and
come to
pedophile are
me
two different
and a
things.
child, yes. And that didn't go down very well with me because my dad apologized to me on his behalf and said, and asked me what exactly happened. And I told him, but not in detail, because even at the time it was uncomfortable to talk about to my dad, in detail because he was close to my uncle, and
Was
how
it
do
your
I
brother?
no, it was my mom's brother, my mom's cousins rather. My mom
Okay.
and my uncle are first cousins. So it was I did not tell my dad in detail. All he knew was that he asked me what happened. I explained that he had been trying to get at me for a long time, but I didn't realize. And I went to his office once, and he got me to sit on his laps, and he bounced me up and down, and he ejaculated on me on my dress. And another time he stuck his tongue down my throat forcefully in his house. And so those are the two things he did to me. But he carried on trying to do more, but nothing more ever happened because I kept escaping and running away and hiding from him whenever he came to visit. And my dad stopped talking to him for a little while, but I believe, and I'm not 100% sure, but I believe now they're on okay terms. I believe that they are speaking and they're fine. I've not been in Cameroon in a while, but I believe that they are, which, if I'm correct, I don't see why that should be the case, to be honest. But again, I feel like it is because of the rape culture. It's
Yeah.
it's it's just normal
Oh
for
Jesus.
it's just perceived as normal to hear that this person has done this. Oh well, there wasn't any intercourse, so yeah, okay, it's not that bad. I think that that's the perspective which we need to change because this was done to me, and I had to go through all that pain, and this is supposed to be my uncle. He shouldn't be looking at me that way. He shouldn't be even remotely thinking
Yeah.
about doing stuff like that to me. So it's
Yeah.
not right at all.
You
um,
know, when you talk about, like, I'm physically reacting because when you talk about that, come and sit on my lap. If I tell you how many of the text messages I got, how many of the people who called me to have a conversation about this, and in talking about, you know, the show said to me, this uncle made me sit on his lap. Or my mother told me, don't ever sit on anybody's lap. Or don't ever have somebody call you his wife. Or, it all came back to this uncle and laps, and little girls sitting in men's laps. And so when you say that to me, it's like I'm infuriated. I'm infuriated because it is everywhere. It is somebody who sat in some uncle's lap. It is some uncle who, and I said, by the way, for all the uncles listening, I'm not indicting you. We're saying in our culture, where your father's friends, your father's brothers and cousins and all male relatives or whatever of a certain age are uncles, this is what's happening. People are saying, little girl sit in my lap, and then this kind of nonsense is happening. You know, I heard so many stories of little girls sitting in people's laps.
Mm.
Can we just now say to mothers and fathers, please don't let your daughter sit in people's laps?
True. Yeah. Simple. Simple.
I know it sounds excessive, but we have to start somewhere.
Mm. Yeah. Because it's not always as innocent as it looks. You know, I mean, I'm only saying from experience. And in that moment, I was 10, and I just it felt wrong. And as a child, you feel like there's something not right here. I said that, uncle, I want to sit on the other side. And he said, no, are you scared of me? I'm your uncle. And he kept bouncing me, right?
That are you scared of me? Oh my God, I'm getting the
Yeah.
creeps. That
Yeah.
line, are
Yeah.
you scared? Okay.
Mm.
I thought we're coming in for a closure session. I think we're opening up.
Opening up. Yeah, I
But
didn't mention that. I forgot to mention that. But
yeah,
I did include it in my book. Uh, so yes, I think I was trying to explain my parents' standpoint
action.
now. Yeah, so at that time, over years ago, my parents did express their grief finally and their remorse for what happened. And so fast forward to now, when I've published my second book. So in publishing my first book, which was an anthology, so a poetry collection.
Poetry, yeah.
So when I published my first book and when I published my second book, just coincidentally, my mom happened to be here in London with me at the time of publishing. So she's always been like a very big supporter. She says things like, I'm very proud of you. Everything you do goes very well. Everything you touch just it becomes very successful. You're very great at what you do. So she said the same things when I was publishing both books. However, she's not read my books at all because she knows what the contents are, and she just says she's not going to be able to read them, understandably so.
Yeah.
Same with the videos she heard. Well, I told her I've been doing videos. She knows that I make videos and put them on social media to give people tips on what to look out for in order to prevent child sexual abuse. So she's aware. So I didn't specifically call her to let her know that there's this three-part one that I've done, but she did hear about it because she has friends who are on social media. So she did hear about the videos, and she called me to say, oh, she heard about some new videos I've made or recorded, interviews that I've done, and wow, amazing, great work, keep up the good work. But I am not going to be able to watch them, which I have no issue with. My dad, I don't know if he's read my book or not, but I've not had any conversations about any of this with him. So about writing books about it or putting out videos, I've had no conversations whatsoever with him about it. So I have no idea how he feels.
Yeah.
It would be surprising to me if he has not heard anything about me putting out teachings or interviews or the contents of my book. I'm sure he would know. I don't know how much he knows, but I've had no conversation with him about any of this. I do speak to him, but about anything else, but we don't talk about it. I've not asked him.
Like that zone.
Yes, right. Yeah, so I wouldn't be able to say how he's doing, how she's doing, how they're feeling. I don't know. But what I will say is that what I feel from them is support. I definitely feel support. So,
Yeah,
they say actions speak louder than words.
yeah,
I definitely feel support. They may not speak specifically about my abuse, but in every other thing that they do, that they show me, I feel support. And for me, that is good enough.
yeah,
In the past, I wanted more. I wanted, I would call them up and, enraged. Why you not saying anything? Haven't you heard that this happened? How can you just not say anything? Don't you feel any remorse? Don't you feel any say something? I wanted more, and I wasn't getting any more than just an apology. And to me, it was just an apology. So I wanted more explanations, but at some point, I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to get any more. And so I let it be because I
yeah.
felt like they are showing me support. So I'll take it and just leave it at that.
So what I would say is this. I think that's a really mature way of approaching it. And at the end of the day, you have to do your own healing. And that makes sense in that context. What I would say is you just said you think they did the best with what they knew. And what I want to put out here as much as I can is to all the parents listening, thanks to your story, Manny, we all know better. We all know different, right? So let this not happen again. And then we all find ourselves in a place where we're saying, well, the parents, did enough of what they knew. That generation, our parents' generation, didn't talk about these things,
Mm,
right? We're talking about it. And I hope that it's not for nothing, right? So
yeah.
I will say that. And it's so, I can understand what you're saying because as parents, you're absolutely right. We think w- we're giving to our kids what they need, what they want. And if I
Hmm.
take it back to the book, The Five Love Languages, right? I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Haven't
In
read
that,
it, but I've heard of the love languages. Yeah.
yeah. So in it, basically, it's a book. It's for couples. I think it could be for anyone, but it's pretty much you take this exercise, which gives your loved ones an idea of how you receive love or what matters to you. Is it acts of kindness? Is it quality time spent together? Is it gifts? Is it blah, blah, blah? So if adults to adults in a relationship, we don't always even know what we want from each other, how will we know what our kids really want from us?
Exactly.
How do we know how they want us to express love? So as parents, what we do is we give it to them the way we received it, first of all. And so it's not to make excuses for your parents, it's just to say, I know parenting is a hard job. And I commend you for saying, you know what, I'm not gonna hang on to this and nail my parents to a cross. But it's our job as parents to be extra super duper vigilant, right? It's just and so I think we all got lulled into this false sense of safety with the village, right? The village that takes care of the child. And I think this has slapped some of us wide awake, right? I mean, a lot of people who reach that way just like, oh my God, this happened to me. My child goes here and I'm paying it. We have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. It's great to have the village, but you need to make sure you know who is in that village and what they are about. That to me was the biggest wake up call, right? Was don't just blindly say the village raises the child here. It's my child,
Yeah.
bye bye.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other person who a lot of people found fascinating in this story and wanted to know more about was who do you think?
My brothers.
Your older brother.
Oh yes. Yeah, he's
Who comes out beside you as a hero of this story,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
A lot,
he
a lot, a lot of people said to me, how is it that I don't know what class he was in secondary school
he
for
was in
context,
so he was on holidays to go back into form 3. So he was in form 2 at the time, but
right?
starting form 3.
How does a child this age come in and pick up on this stuff
Yeah,
that no one else in the house was noticing? So this was the question
exactly.
I got. Like how he sat at that dinner table or lunch table, he watched you guys be very jumpy with the houseboy and he went, what the heck is this? So tell us a little bit about when your brother finally knew that it was rape, when you finally told him, what did that look like? Where is he now in terms of how he has dealt with it himself? And anything else you want to share about him? Because he's
Yes,
healed.
he's
He's
yeah,
better.
I'm very close to all my brothers, by the way. But he and I have the were the closest in age, so we're 18 months apart. And he found out not directly from me that it was actually rape. He found out when I told my eldest brother, so our firstborn, and when my eldest brother broke it to my parents, he broke it to that brother as well. I don't remember what I named him in the book, but I'm not going to say his real name. But yes, so he found out at that point and he reached out at that time and said it was sorry and everything. And but he visits me. He doesn't live in the UK, but he visits me yearly. And whenever we're together, it's always easy to talk to him. It was always easy to talk to him in the past when we're kids, and it's still the same now. um, we don't talk about it anymore because it's a non-issue, really. But when I was writing my first book and my second book, he was here from time to time, and I told him what I was writing about. Yes, he had a few questions he asked, and it was just more, conversational. So I wouldn't say he's like, yeah, there's no response to how is he dealing with it because there's nothing to deal with.
Deal with.
Yes, it's just something that happened in the past. I wouldn't say he's suffering from it. He probably shed a few tears in the past. I wouldn't know because my brothers they keep that stuff away from me. They don't want me to know that they are struggling or suffering. I know that I know this because my two younger brothers, they are in the UK with me, and when I was going through therapy, they were both aware. And I think because they were in the UK here with me, they were usually my first point of contact.
Yeah.
When I left a therapy session, for instance, and I've gone through so much turmoil mentally in my head, and I needed to vent, I'd always first call my husband, but I also would call my brothers, and they literally would just be on the phone and listen, and just listen and let me rant and talk and blame my parents and just be so angry and shout and cry. And they were that for me. They gave me a safe space to just vent and scream and blame for as long as I wanted.
So healing.
Hmm.
First of all, do you feel like you have healed, or is it more a journey?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's a journey. I am healing. I've healed so much. I've come such a long way. I'm so far away from where I was even a year ago,
Yeah.
and not to talk of 10, 20 years ago. It's just been a long road. Like, I think the best way to put it into context is with examples. So, for instance, I have young kids. My oldest is 12, and youngest is 7. So I still wake my youngest one up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, if he's had a lot of water to drink, right, during the day. So I would wake him up to take him to the toilet. So up to a year ago, yeah, about a year ago, what happened was, so up to a year ago, and from the time when I had my all my kids, right, when they were younger, if I wake my kids up at night to take them to the toilet, I always experienced anxiety.
Yeah.
So the anxiety um, was it showed up as me shivering. Sometimes I would even cry, just start crying because I felt so sad. So it wasn't anxiety actually, it's just sadness and anger.
Yeah.
Because whenever I went to lift my kids up from their bed to take them to the toilet, I remembered me being lifted as a child. and I'll just be so angry. Why did he
Mm.
do that to me? Why? What's wrong with
Ah,
him? What's he trying to do? And I'll be so angry in the middle of the night. And it's gone on since I had my kids. Even as babies, you're changing the
wow.
nappy at night. Changing the nappy in the middle of the night. You don't necessarily switch on the light. Maybe you have a side lamp on, or I use the light from my phone, so the light is dim, so it reminds me of when I was being raped, in the dim light or in the dark. And so
Wow.
those things,
Oof.
it's my whole life. It's just it's becomes normal to me when I go to pick up. So up until a year ago, I still used to like shiver a little, just shivering because from the anger that I still felt. But I realized that it's those moments of anger lasted longer and shorter and shorter as time went on. And so now, when I go to wake up my child to take him to the toilet at night, I don't feel any anger. The memory just pops back in my head for a second, a few seconds, and then it disappears. So that's why I said it's a process. It
Yes.
gets better. It diminishes with time, and there's nothing you can really do. You can't do much about that because the memories are going to be there.
Yeah.
So what it is it's I mean, some things take effort. You have to try, but with memories, it's a memory. It's there, and it's how your body or your mind reacts to it. Over time, I've learned to retrain my brain to to view stimuli as different. So again, I'll
Mm.
give you an example. Uh, it's just in therapy, and I learned this through therapy. So, for instance, I grew up with a phobia of wet bathrooms. And the reason why is because whenever George took me to the brown toilet, it was wet. So, growing up, it was a nightmare having a shower in Lords in secondary school because the showers were always wet.
Wet.
Right. And so
Wow, Manny.
yeah, you have no idea. So that was a problem for me. I had to just suck it up. What was I going to do? Not shower because you have to
Wait,
shower
those showers were wet all the
all the
time.
time. They were never dry. So one way in which I dealt with that, which may sound really funny, but one way in which I dealt with that was I always made sure and ask my classmates, they will attest to this, but they probably didn't know why I did this. As soon as the bell rang in the morning in secondary school to go have a shower, I was always the first person there because early in the morning those showers were dry because they'd had an opportunity to dry all night.
Overnight,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I made sure I was the first, and I would always go there with my finger and touch the floor and the walls, even though they're not the cleanest, but I'll
Nasty.
touch them, right?
Yeah.
I'll touch them to make sure that they're dry, and then I'll shower. And then,
Wow.
so you adjust your life by doing little things like that, but no one around you knows what is going on. It's because it terrified me just standing in a wet shower. And I came to the UK while I was at uni, and I was living in shared accommodation, and I didn't like wet showers still, but I had to only shower when it's dry. um, um, and but I needed to retrain my brain to not see it as so bad. So I got to a point where I managed to shower with my eyes closed, and so I don't see it. And it's like if I'm not seeing it wet, then it's almost not wet. And with time, I got used to having a shower in a wet shower. But it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of suffering, really, because it's a phobia, and I would put myself in that phobia in that situation as much as possible until it
To
lessened.
overcome. Yes.
Right. So yeah, today I'm fine with wet showers. But that's just to say it is a journey. It takes a lot of effort, and not everyone is able to do that. It's just a lot of work. it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like, I could go on and give you loads more examples. S- with my husband, it was even worse. With intimacy, it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I want to talk about that to the extent that you can. Do you
Hmm.
know what? I have this, we're on a split screen right now. And when you talked about waking your kids to go to the bathroom, I literally in my mind have the split screen. Yeah.
Hmm.
On this hand, George picking you up to go to the bathroom. On this hand, you picking up your kids to go to the bathroom. But the destination is so different.
Hmm.
The outcome is so different. The intention is so different. The pair of hands holding you as a kid versus your kids is so different. And I just have this like movie split screen image in my head that's like two things that on the surface
Mm.
look the same,
Yeah.
but underneath are so shockingly different. I
Mm.
can't imagine like just living that day in and day out. And
Yeah,
wow.
it's horrible. But I was determined, and I think it's after having my kids that it pushed me even more to,
Mm,
it made me even more determined to get out of that funky, grim state. It just, because it became more apparent to me the extent to which this thing had affected me.
you mentioned your husband, and this was a question that a lot of people wanted to know.
Mm.
Well, two things. One, is he a saint?
It's saying, oh, okay, okay.
And not in a way like you're a problem or anything, but the way that people think about this money is to understand what a person has gone through, right? Like what you went through, to contend with that, to anticipate what's coming, and then to not know the side things that are going to come that
Hmm.
you just can't anticipate. Like how is he doing? How did you guys get to the point where you're even married and have kids and
Yeah.
doing well on the one hand, and on the other hand the question of intimacy, just how you finally got to a place where you could avail yourself, right,
Hmm.
of love and intimacy and partnership after so much had been taken away from you.
Yeah. So that's a very good question, and yeah, we met when I came to university. We met at university at 19. I was in another relationship for like just 2 or 3 months when I met my husband, and so we were very good friends. He was hilarious, still is very funny, and I I needed that, or I thrived a lot with fun, with people just being funny. It was something I lacked in my childhood, and I think that's the reason why I loved being in secondary school, in boarding school. There were so many funny things, funny people, like,
Yeah.
and I just was always laughing about stupid, silly things which weren't even funny, but I found them funny. I loved being in that state. And so when I met my husband and we became friends, he was hilarious. So I loved being around him. I just loved being in his presence. And so we started dating maybe 3 to 4 months after meeting. Before we started dating, I actually told him that I was raped, and he was pissed off, and like, he was he asked, where were your parents, how could they let that happen, and but despite the fact that he had heard in the past about people who had been raped, he had never really heard anyone describe anything to him or explain, oh, this is what this used to happen and that used to happen, and he would do this
Yeah.
and he would do that. So when I narrated it to him for the first time, narrated in detail, but not as much as I told you guys now, but I told him quite a lot of information about the rape. He Now I know that he was shocked. to into silence. He was just quiet the entire time, and I didn't feel uncomfortable or awkward explaining. I just kept on talking and talking and talking. And I now know that he was shocked, and that's why he was so quiet. But his silence enabled me to feel even safer and just talk about it. Because in the past, when I had narrated or started narrating to anyone else, they would kind of interrupt and make faces like of repulsion and disgust, like, oh my God, or just start crying. And that would immediately make me stop because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to cause this person any more hurt. So my husband was the first person who or not the first, but the first person I told in this much detail about the rape, who just sat and listened. And that's one thing I encourage people to do. When someone tells you that they've been raped, don't come out with all these questions, because that just makes them feel even more like they were at fault. Just listen. You don't have to say anything, just listen to them. And I'm saying that from experience, because that was my experience, and it helped me to just open up more and feel like supported. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. So we I'm trying to explain it in a progressive way. So we've been together now for 20 years, um, but we got married at around our 11th year together, right? So when we were dating, before we ever got married, I, I had sexual difficulties. I did, but I did not know I did. I didn't understand, put it that way. Not that I did not know. I knew that something is not right, but I didn't understand it. I certainly did not attribute it to my childhood sexual abuse at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
At all. I just thought, oh well, everyone has painful sex. Everyone's sex pains. I had no idea that it shouldn't be like this. I had friends at university who, you have different types of friends. I had some friends who would never talk about sex. And then I had other friends who would talk about everything they wanted to talk about, in terms of sex. So I had such friends, and there was just once, thankfully, I thank God for that day. They were talking about sex and boys, and I finally gathered the courage, because I'd heard them talk about it a lot, many times before, about how good it is and how many partners they've had, and try this and
And
try
you were
that, and
like,
different sex
what?
positions. Yes. And I was like, but how can it be enjoyable when it hurts so
Yep.
much?
Yep.
So I pulled one of my friends to the side. Well, she went to the kitchen, and I followed her there, and I was like, this is my chance. Let me ask her without the other girls being around. There was four of us sitting, hanging out in one of their apartments. And so I went to her, because I felt a little bit closer to her. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, what, like, how, when you say, it was good, like, how can it be good? Doesn't it hurt? She was like, no, hurt how? And she looked at me like I was crazy. And unfortunately for me, or fortunately, one of the other girls had just walked in, and she was like, what hurts? And so it was three of us now having the conversation. We're like, no, it doesn't hurt. And so what kind of sex have you been having? Like, it doesn't hurt. Like, no. So this, to cut a long story short, this just turned into a 3-hour conversation. We all sat there, and they are the ones who gave me my first lesson, oh, lecture
Dysphoria.
on, yes, on the anatomy and physiology of the body, of the reproductive organs, of the
Wow.
vagina and sensitivities. And I had never heard of any of that. I didn't know how how it works, how it should feel, how intimacy. I didn't know any of that. I was, at the time, I wasn't in love with my husband. I wasn't. I liked him a lot. I loved him, but I didn't feel those butterflies. I didn't feel that deep connection. I didn't have the ability to feel it, but I
Yeah.
didn't know that I didn't have the ability. I was completely blocked. Um, and so when they, all that time that I spent with those girls, allowed them to open my eyes to that, because they're like, oh, but you've been with him for a few years now, don't you feel this way? Don't you feel that way? I didn't know the word aroused, let alone to know what it felt like to
What
be
it felt,
aroused.
yeah.
I had never felt it. I didn't know what that was like. I had no idea. I didn't, nothing. I was just like a brick. I felt nothing, never ever did.
Wow.
Um, and they were very helpful girlfriends. They came out. We talked about. I even took down notes. I was forever taking down notes. They gave me tips on what to
I'm trying to
try.
picture you guys like, what was it
Oh,
you said? Aroused? Okay.
yes,
It's
yes,
necessary.
exactly. I wrote out all these tips, and I've written all this in my book, by the way, in detail. I wrote out all these tips of what to do. They said, try this, try that position, try doing this, and try these products. And nothing worked for me. And so I felt even more devastated. But that is when nothing worked for me, that's when I felt like, okay, something is wrong with
Something's
me.
wrong.
Yes, so these girls are the ones who made it apparent to me that there's something not right with me, but I didn't know what was wrong.
Yeah.
And I did not speak to my husband about it. I didn't. So I went to try all these things with him, but I didn't tell him what I was doing,
Oh
what I was
God.
trying to
Oh
achieve.
God.
Yes.
You think well, I'm sure he didn't mind. Like, what are we
No,
trying
no,
to
no, no.
what, what technique are we going for now?
Exactly what's going on, but yeah, hey,
What's the
okay.
birthday?
Right.